Elena Brooks stood frozen in the sterile hallway of Hawthorne Women's Health Clinic, her trembling hands clutching a crumpled appointment slip. She'd spent 3 months ignoring the pain, convinced she could outlast it like she'd outlasted everything else in her 30 years of surviving paycheck to paycheck. But when Dr. Nathan Cole walked through that door, a man who looked more like he belonged on magazine covers than in a medical office, everything she thought she knew about keeping her distance shattered. What she didn't know was that their first awkward encounter would set off a chain of events that would force both of them to confront the walls they'd built around their hearts. If you want to see how far this story can travel, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city below. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The fluorescent lights in the waiting room buzzed with that particular frequency that made Elena's headache worse. She'd been sitting in the same plastic chair for 40 minutes, her appointment time long past, watching other women get called back while she remained invisible. Story of her life, really. Elena Brooks. The nurse's voice cut through the low murmur of the waiting room. Elena stood, her knees protesting after sitting too long in one position. She followed the nurse down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic, and something else she couldn't quite place. Maybe lavender, maybe just industrial air freshener trying too hard. Room 3. Change into the gown, opening in the front. The doctor will be with you shortly. Shortly. Elena had learned that shortly in medical offices meant anywhere from 5 minutes to half an hour. She changed quickly, hating every second of the paper-thin gown that barely covered anything. The examination table crinkled loudly when she sat down. She pulled her phone from her purse, checking the time. She had exactly 2 hours before her shift at the diner started. If this ran long, she'd have to skip lunch again. The knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Brooks? I'm Dr. Cole." Elena looked up and immediately forgot how to breathe properly. The man who walked through the door was nothing like what she'd expected. Dr. Morrison, her previous physician, had been a kindly woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. This man was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked professionally styled even at the end of what must have been a long day. He wore a white coat over a blue button-down that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His eyes were a striking gray blue, and they met hers with a directness that made her want to look away. "I'm filling in for Dr. Morrison while she's on sabbatical," he said, extending his hand. "I know changes in physicians can be uncomfortable, especially for appointments like this. If you'd prefer to reschedule with Dr. Morrison when she returns in 3 months, I completely understand." Elena stared at his outstretched hand for a moment too long before shaking it. His grip was warm, professional, brief. "No, I need to get this done today," she managed. "All right." He settled onto the rolling stool, pulling up her chart on the tablet he carried. "I see you've been experiencing some concerning symptoms. Why don't you tell me what's been going on?" Elena had rehearsed this part. She'd practiced in the mirror that morning, trying to find clinical words that would make it all sound less mortifying. But now, sitting here in a paper gown in front of this man who looked like he'd stepped out of a different universe entirely, all her prepared phrases evaporated. "I've been having some pain," she said finally. "And irregular cycles. It's probably nothing." Dr. Cole's eyes stayed on his tablet, but she saw the slight tightening around his mouth. "How long has this been going on? A few months? Maybe 4. And the pain? Can you describe it for me? Sharp, dull, constant, intermittent?" Elena wrapped her arms around herself, acutely aware of how thin the gown was. "Sharp sometimes. Mostly it's just this ache that won't go away. Gets worse during—" She stopped, her face heating up. "During your cycle," he finished gently, still not looking at her, giving her space to be uncomfortable without making it worse. "Yes." He asked more questions about her medical history, her family history, her lifestyle. Elena answered in monosyllables when she could, short sentences when she couldn't. She kept her eyes fixed on a point just past his left shoulder, unable to look directly at him. "I'm going to need to do an examination," he said, finally. "I know this isn't comfortable, but it's important that we figure out what's causing your symptoms. I'll have a nurse present, and I'll explain everything I'm doing before I do it. Does that sound all right?" Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The examination was as mortifying as she'd feared, but Dr. Cole's manner was so matter-of-fact, so completely professional, that some of her panic eased. He narrated each step in a calm voice, and the nurse, an older woman named Rita, kept up a gentle stream of conversation about the weather, her daughter's upcoming wedding, anything to distract from what was happening. "You can get dressed now," Dr. Cole said finally, snapping off his gloves. "I'll step out and give you some privacy. When you're ready, we'll talk about next steps." Elena dressed faster than she ever had in her life, her hands shaking as she pulled on her jeans. The waistband bit into her stomach. She'd bought them secondhand 2 years ago when she'd been thinner, before the endless shifts at the diner and the dollar menu dinners had caught up with her. Dr. Cole knocked before re-entering, waiting for her come in before opening the door. "So," he said, settling back onto the stool. "Based on what I'm seeing, I want to run some tests. Blood work, an ultrasound, possibly a few other diagnostics depending on what those show. Some of your symptoms could indicate endometriosis, but I don't want to jump to conclusions before we have more information." "How much will that cost?" The question was out before Elena could stop herself. Dr. Cole paused. "Do you have insurance?" "Through the state. Medicaid." "Then most of it should be covered. There might be some co-pays, but the office can work with you on a payment plan if needed." Elena did the mental math anyway. Even with insurance, even with payment plans, medical bills had a way of spiraling. She'd learned that lesson when she'd broken her wrist 3 years ago and spent the next 18 months paying it off. "I need to think about it," she said. "Ms. Brooks, Elena, these symptoms you're describing aren't going to get better on their own. If this is what I think it might be, delaying treatment will only make things worse." "I said I need to think about it." Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Dr. Cole studied her for a long moment. "Okay," he said finally, "but I want you to promise me something. If the pain gets worse, if you start running a fever, if anything changes, you come back immediately. Not in a few weeks, not when you get around to it. Immediately. Can you do that?" Elena nodded, already gathering her purse, already planning her escape. "I mean it." His voice stopped her at the door. "Some things can't wait." "I've been waiting my whole life, Dr. Cole. I think I can wait a little longer." She was out the door before he could respond, down the hallway before the nurse could call her back to schedule follow-up appointments she had no intention of making. She pushed through the clinic's front doors into the sharp afternoon air, gulping it down like she'd been drowning. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, her manager at the diner. "Running short tonight, can you come in early?" Elena closed her eyes, leaning against the brick wall of the clinic. The pain in her abdomen throbbed in time with her heartbeat, a reminder that nothing had actually been fixed, that she was walking away from the one person who might actually be able to help. But the alternative, owing money she didn't have, dealing with bills she couldn't pay, getting tangled up in the healthcare system that had already failed her so many times, that was worse than the pain. At least the pain was familiar. She texted Marcus back. "Be there in 20. Well, the Bluebird Diner occupied a corner lot downtown, its faded blue awning visible from 2 blocks away. Elena had been working there for 3 years, ever since she'd aged out of the group home and needed a job that paid cash when she needed it, and didn't ask too many questions about her lack of references. "You look like hell," Marcus said when she walked in through the back entrance. "Love you too." "I'm serious, Elena. You okay?" Elena tied her apron around her waist, wincing when the strings pressed against her stomach. "Just tired. Long day." Marcus was 50-something with gray stubble and a prosthetic leg from a car accident a decade ago. He'd given Elena a chance when nobody else would, and she'd been trying to pay him back ever since by being the most reliable server he had. She picked up extra shifts, covered for people who called in sick, never complained about the drunk customers, or the ones who thought a 50-cent tip on a $20 bill was generous. "Table 6 just sat down," Marcus said. "Looks like the corporate lunch crowd." Elena grabbed her order pad and headed out to the floor. The lunch rush was already building. Construction workers from the site down the street, office employees from the bank across the road. The usual mix of regulars and one-timers. Table 6 held 4 men in business suits, already deep in conversation about quarterly earnings and market projections. Elena approached with her professional smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Welcome to the Bluebird. Can I start you off with some drinks?" The rest of the shift blurred together. Orders placed, food delivered, tables cleared, coffee refills, and ketchup bottles. A kid who spilled chocolate milk all over the floor, his mother mortified. Elena already grabbing the mop and telling her it was fine, happened all the time. An elderly couple who came in every Tuesday and ordered the same thing, turkey club, hold the tomato for him, chef salad with dressing on the side for her. They tipped exactly 15%, calculated down to the penny. By 7 o'clock, Elena's feet were screaming, and the pain in her abdomen had graduated from a dull ache to something that made her catch her breath between tables. She was clearing dishes from a booth by the window when she heard Marcus call her name. "Elena, phone!" She carried the stack of dishes to the back, dumping them in the industrial sink before picking up the wall phone near the office. "Hello? Elena Brooks?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes? This is Janet from Hawthorne Women's Health. You left before we could schedule your follow-up appointments. Dr. Cole wanted me to call and—" Elena hung up. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Telemarketer?" "Something like that." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. The dinner rush was lighter than lunch, giving Elena time to lean against the counter and try to breathe through the waves of pain. She'd gotten good at hiding it, straightening her face when customers looked, saving her grimaces for the moments in the kitchen when nobody was watching. "You should go home early," Marcus said around 8:30. "I'm fine." "You're pale as a ghost and you keep holding your stomach when you think nobody's looking. Go home. I can handle the last hour." Elena wanted to argue, but the truth was she'd been fighting tears for the last 20 minutes. She untied her apron, grabbed her jacket from the back, and headed out into the night. The walk to her apartment took 15 minutes. 15 minutes through streets that got progressively darker and quieter, past the closed storefronts and the corner store with its flickering neon sign. Her building was a 4-story walk-up that had been undergoing renovations for as long as she'd lived there, which meant the landlord had put up some scaffolding 2 years ago and then apparently forgotten about it. She climbed the stairs slowly, using the railing to pull herself up. 3rd floor, end of the hall. Apartment 3C, her home for the past 3 years. A studio with a kitchenette that barely deserved the name, and a bathroom where the shower pressure was more suggestion than stream. But it was hers. The rent was cheap enough that she could usually make it even when tips were slow. The building was mostly quiet except for the couple downstairs who fought every Saturday night with predictable regularity. Her neighbors kept to themselves, which suited her fine. Elena dropped her keys on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and made it to the bed before the pain doubled her over. She curled onto her side, arms wrapped around her middle, breathing through her nose like she'd taught herself to do. It would pass. It always passed. Except this time it didn't. 20 minutes later, she was still curled in the same position, sweat soaking through her shirt. The pain had teeth now, sharp and vicious, radiating from her pelvis through her entire lower body. She reached for her phone with a shaking hand, squinting at the screen. The voicemail icon blinked at her. Against her better judgment, she played it. "Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Nathan Cole from Hawthorne Women's Health. I know you didn't want to schedule follow-up appointments today, and I respect that, but I need you to understand something. The symptoms you described are concerning, very concerning. I'm not trying to scare you, but I am trying to make sure you have all the information. Please call the clinic back, or if you'd prefer, I can—" A pause. "Look, here's my direct number. If you're experiencing any increase in pain, any fever, any nausea or vomiting, I want you to call. Day or night. I mean that. This is 5550147. Again, that's 5550147. Is possible. Matan." Elena listened to the message 3 times, memorizing the number even though she had no intention of calling it. Doctors didn't give out their personal numbers. They especially didn't do it for broke patients on Medicaid who could barely afford copays. She set the phone down and closed her eyes, willing the pain to recede. It didn't. At midnight, she was still awake, still curled in the same position. The pain had settled into a constant grinding presence that made sleep impossible. She got up, moving carefully, and dry swallowed 2 aspirin from the bottle she kept in the bathroom. They wouldn't help much, but they might take the edge off. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, dark circles under her eyes, skin gray with pain, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. She splashed cold water on her face and immediately regretted it when the movement sent fresh spikes of agony through her abdomen. Back in bed, she pulled up her banking app and checked her balance. $243 until payday on Friday. Rent was due in a week, $550 for the apartment plus utilities. She'd been planning to use her next 3 shifts to build up a buffer, maybe get ahead for once instead of playing constant catch-up. She couldn't afford to be sick. She literally could not afford it. At 2 in the morning, she called in sick to the diner for the first time in 6 months. Marcus answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Elena? I can't come in tomorrow. I'm sorry. What's wrong? You sound terrible. Just need a day. I'll be back Thursday. She hung up before he could ask more questions, then turned off her phone completely. She didn't want to see messages, didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to think about Dr. Nathan Cole's voicemail sitting in her inbox like an accusation. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by pain and strange dreams where she was back in the clinic. But this time Dr. Cole was asking her questions she couldn't answer, and the fluorescent lights kept getting brighter and brighter until she couldn't see anything at all. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, rain drumming against her single window. Elena woke at 6 out of habit, her body trained to the diner's schedule even when she wasn't working. The pain had subsided to a dull roar, still there, still demanding attention, but manageable if she moved carefully. She made coffee in the cheap drip machine she'd bought at Goodwill, standing by the window while it brewed and watching rain run down the glass. The street below was already busy with morning commuters, people heading to jobs and lives that looked nothing like hers. Her phone remained off. Whatever messages had come in overnight could wait. The coffee helped a little, warming her from the inside even if it couldn't touch the pain. She drank it black because she'd run out of milk 3 days ago and kept forgetting to buy more. She should eat something. She'd skipped dinner last night, but the thought of food made her stomach turn. Instead, she took a long shower, letting the lukewarm water run over her until it started to turn cold. She dressed in her most comfortable clothes, worn sweatpants, and an oversized t-shirt she'd stolen from a group home years ago. She had no plans for the day except to rest, to let her body recover enough that she could make it through her next shift. Except resting wasn't something Elena was particularly good at. By noon, she was pacing her small apartment, restless and uncomfortable. The rain had stopped, leaving everything dripping and gray. She needed air, needed to move, needed something other than these 4 walls closing in on her. She grabbed her jacket and headed out. The coffee shop 2 blocks from her apartment was the kind of place Elena usually avoided. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, a menu full of drinks with names like The Philosopher and Midnight in Paris. The kind of place where coffee cost more than her hourly wage at the diner. But it was warm, and it was quiet, and she could sit in the corner with a regular coffee, just coffee, nothing fancy, and watch the rain start up again outside. She was halfway through her cup, lost in her own thoughts, when she heard a familiar voice. Elena? She looked up, and there he was. Dr. Nathan Cole, except he wasn't wearing his white coat anymore. He was in jeans, actual jeans, and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look more blue than gray. He held a to-go cup in one hand and had the kind of expression that suggested he was just as surprised to see her as she was to see him. Dr. Cole. Elena's hand tightened around her own cup. Hi. Is it okay if I... He gestured to the empty chair across from her. Every instinct told her to say no, to make up an excuse about leaving, to maintain the careful distance she'd established yesterday. But there was something in his expression, uncertainty, maybe, or genuine concern, that made her nod. Sure. He sat down, setting his cup on the table. Up close, without the clinical setting between them, Elena could see details she'd missed before. The slight shadow under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well. There was a small scar above his right eyebrow. His hands, wrapped around his coffee cup, had long fingers with calluses she wouldn't have expected from a doctor. I tried calling, he said. I know. Did you listen to the voicemail? Elena hesitated, then nodded. And I'm fine. The pain's better. I just needed rest. Dr. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. Elena, I don't think you understand how serious. I understand perfectly. She cut him off, her voice quiet but firm. I understand that medical care costs money I don't have. I understand that running tests means bills and follow-ups, and more appointments I can't afford to take time off work for. I understand all of it, Dr. Cole. That's why I need you to stop calling. Nathan. What? Outside the office, it's Nathan. Just Nathan. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. And I'm not trying to make your life harder. I'm trying to help. I didn't ask for help. No, you didn't, but you need it anyway. Elena felt anger spark in her chest, hot and sharp and familiar. You don't know what I need. You don't know anything about me. You're right, Nathan said. I don't. But I know pain when I see it, and I know what happens when people ignore symptoms because they're scared of the cost. I've seen it too many times. I've seen people wait until it's an emergency, until their options are limited, until treatment is 10 times more expensive and half as effective. Then maybe the system shouldn't be set up that way. Elena stood, grabbing her jacket. Thanks for the concern, Dr. Cole, but I'll manage on my own like I always have. She was at the door when his voice stopped her. I lost someone because she waited too long. Elena turned. Nathan was still sitting, but his expression had changed. Something raw and unguarded had broken through his professional composure. My sister, he continued, she had symptoms for months. Pain, irregular cycles, all the things you're describing. She kept putting off seeing a doctor because she was in grad school, didn't have good insurance, thought she could tough it out. By the time she finally went in, the endometriosis had caused severe scarring. She needed major surgery, had complications, spent weeks in the hospital. I'm sorry, Elena said, and meant it. She's okay now, but she could have avoided all of it if she'd gotten help earlier. Nathan's eyes met hers. I know I'm coming on too strong. I know I'm probably crossing professional boundaries right now, but I can't. He stopped, took a breath. I can't watch someone else make the same mistake. Elena stood frozen, her hand on the door handle, torn between the urge to run and something else she couldn't quite name. One appointment, Nathan said. Just the blood work and ultrasound. I'll make sure the office works with you on costs. We have programs for patients with financial difficulties. You won't get blindsided by bills. I promise you that. Why do you care so much? The question hung between them. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Because you remind me of her, he said finally. The way you're trying to be tough, trying to handle everything alone. And because... He stopped again, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because everyone deserves proper health care, regardless of what they can pay. That's why I became a doctor in the first place. Elena wanted to believe him. Some part of her, buried deep beneath layers of disappointment and survival instinct, desperately wanted to believe that someone actually cared what happened to her. But belief was dangerous. Belief led to trust, and trust led to hurt. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. She left before the conversation could go any further, stepping out into the rain that had started up again. But as she walked back to her apartment, she found herself replaying Nathan's words, the look in his eyes when he'd talked about his sister. Maybe, she thought, maybe one appointment wouldn't hurt. Thursday came, and with it Elena's return to the diner. Marcus gave her a long look when she arrived, but didn't ask questions, just put her on the lunch shift and let her ease back into the rhythm of work. The pain was still there. It never really left anymore, but Elena had gotten good at compartmentalizing it, tucking it away in the back of her mind where it couldn't interfere with taking orders and delivering food. She was refilling coffee for a table of construction workers when her phone buzzed. She ignored it, finished her rounds, and only checked it when she ducked into the bathroom for a quick break. A text from an unknown number. This is Nathan Cole. Janet from the office gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. We have an opening Friday at 2 p.m. if you can make it. No pressure, but the offer stands. N. Elena stared at the message. He'd texted her. Dr. Nathan Cole, who she'd learned from a quick Google search last night, was not just a doctor, but apparently some kind of medical entrepreneur with his own chain of clinics and a net worth that made her monthly salary look like pocket change, had personally texted her about an appointment. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, how much for the blood work and ultrasound? His response came quickly. Total out-of-pocket for you would be about $40 for both, maybe less depending on what the lab charges. The clinic will cover the difference. $40. She could manage $40. Okay. Friday at 2. Great. See you then. N. Elena slipped her phone back into her pocket and returned to the floor, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with the fact that she'd just agreed to see Dr. Nathan Cole again. The rest of the week crawled by. Friday arrived gray and miserable, a cold front moving in that made Elena's entire body ache. She'd picked up an extra morning shift, so by the time she left the diner at 1:30, she was already exhausted. The clinic looked exactly as she remembered. Sterile, efficient, vaguely intimidating. Elena checked in with the receptionist, a different woman than last time, and settled into the waiting room with a magazine she had no intention of reading. Elena Brooks? Different nurse, same hallway. But this time they led her to a different room, smaller, with a desk and 2 chairs instead of an examination table. Dr. Cole will be right in, the nurse said. Elena sat, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. What was she doing here? What was she doing, trusting a man she barely knew, making appointments she couldn't really afford, hoping for answers that might not even exist? The door opened and Nathan walked in, white coat back in place, professional demeanor restored. But when he smiled at her, there was something in it that reminded her of the man in the coffee shop, the one who'd talked about his sister with pain in his eyes. Thanks for coming, he said. Didn't feel like I had much choice. You always have a choice, Elena. You're here because you decided to be. The distinction felt important somehow. Nathan walked her through what would happen. Blood draw first, then ultrasound. Both would be done by technicians, and he'd review the results with her early next week. The whole thing would take maybe an hour. Any questions? Elena had about 1,000 questions, but most of them had nothing to do with medical procedures. She settled for, when will you know something? Lab results usually take a couple of days. Ultrasound I can review pretty quickly. I'll call you Monday or Tuesday at the latest. The blood draw was quick and efficient, handled by a phlebotomist who had clearly done this 10,000 times. The ultrasound was more uncomfortable. The technician was professional but quiet, her face giving away nothing as she moved the wand across Elena's abdomen, taking measurements and images that meant nothing to Elena, but apparently meant something to her. By 3:30, it was over. Elena checked out at the front desk, paid her $40 in cash, and walked out into the cold afternoon feeling somehow lighter and heavier at the same time. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Now all she could do was wait. Monday came and went without a phone call. Elena told herself she didn't care, that she'd expected as much. The doctors always took longer than they promised. But she kept her phone volume up all day anyway, checking it between tables at the diner, during her breaks, on her walk home. Tuesday morning, she was 3 hours into her shift when her phone finally buzzed. She was carrying a tray of dirty dishes to the back, so she couldn't check it right away. By the time she got to her phone, she had 2 missed calls from the clinic and a voicemail. Her hands shook slightly as she played it. Elena, this is Nathan Cole. I have your test results and I'd like to discuss them with you. Can you call me back at the clinic? The number is... He rattled off the same number she'd called to make the appointment. Or if it's easier, you can text me at the number I used before. Thanks. His voice was carefully neutral, giving away nothing. Elena couldn't tell if that was good or bad. She texted him during her lunch break. Got your message. Working until 4. Can I call after? The response came within minutes. Actually, I'm done with appointments at 4:30. Any chance you could come by the clinic around then? I'd rather discuss this in person. Elena's stomach dropped. In-person conversations meant bad news. Everyone knew that. Doctors didn't ask you to come in just to tell you everything was fine. Is it that bad? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. It's not an emergency. But there are things we need to talk about, and I'd rather do it face-to-face. Can you make it? She checked the schedule Marcus had posted by the time clock. She was off at 4, had tomorrow off completely. No real reason she couldn't go. Okay. 4:30. The afternoon dragged. Elena messed up 2 orders, forgot to refill coffee at table 7, and dropped a fork that clattered across the floor during the quiet lull between lunch and dinner. Marcus pulled her aside around 3. What's going on with you today? Nothing. I'm fine. You're distracted. You sick again? No, just have an appointment after work. Medical stuff. Marcus's expression softened. Everything okay? Don't know yet. That's why I have the appointment. He squeezed her shoulder awkwardly. Take care of yourself, kid. And if you need time off. I know. Thanks, Marcus. At 4 o'clock, Elena clocked out and headed straight for the clinic. She arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time sitting in her car, a 15-year-old Honda with a temperamental starter and a passenger window that didn't roll down anymore, trying to prepare herself for whatever Nathan was going to tell her. Cancer. That was the word that kept circling in her mind. People got called in for in-person discussions when it was cancer. Or something equally catastrophic. Something that required treatment she definitely couldn't afford, that would eat through what little savings she had and leave her drowning in debt. Maybe she should have stayed away. Maybe ignorance really was better. But at 4:25, she got out of the car and walked into the clinic anyway, because the not knowing had become worse than any answer could be. The waiting room was empty this time, the last patients of the day already gone. The receptionist looked up and smiled. "Elena Brooks? Dr. Cole said to send you right back. Room 5. The walk down the hallway felt longer than it had before. Room 5 was the same consultation room she'd been in for her follow-up appointment, the one with the desk and chairs instead of an examination table. Nathan was already there, standing by the window, looking at something on his tablet. He turned when she came in. "Hey, thanks for coming." "You made it sound important." "It is." He gestured to one of the chairs. "Please, sit." Elena sat, her hands gripping the armrests. Nathan pulled the other chair around so he was sitting across from her instead of behind the desk, the tablet balanced on his knee. "So the good news is, it's not cancer." The relief was so sudden and overwhelming that Elena felt lightheaded. Okay, that's good. The not-so-good news is, you were right to be concerned. Your blood work shows markers consistent with endometriosis, and the ultrasound confirms it. You have several lesions, some scarring, and what looks like at least one cyst on your right ovary. Elena stared at him. The words made sense individually, but strung together they sounded like a foreign language. "What does that mean?" Nathan set the tablet aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Endometriosis is a condition where tissue similar to the lining of your uterus grows outside of it. In your case, it's growing on your ovaries, your fallopian tubes, and the lining of your pelvic cavity. That's what's causing the pain. Can you fix it? We can treat it. Surgery would be the most effective option. Go in laparoscopically, remove the lesions and the cyst, clean up the scarring. Recovery would be a few weeks, and it should significantly reduce your pain. Should, not would. Elena caught the hedge. But it's not a cure. Endometriosis can come back. You'd likely need to manage it long-term with hormonal treatment, possibly additional surgeries down the line. And if I don't do the surgery? Nathan's expression tightened. The pain will get worse, the scarring will get worse. You're at high risk for ovarian torsion, which is a medical emergency. And long-term untreated endometriosis can cause infertility. That last word landed like a punch. Elena had never given much thought to having kids. How could she, when she could barely take care of herself? But the idea of the choice being taken away, of her body making that decision for her, felt like losing something she hadn't known she'd wanted. How much? The question came out rough. How much would the surgery cost? Nathan pulled out his phone, tapped a few things, then showed her the screen. It was an estimate from the hospital billing department. The number made Elena's vision blur. "That's with insurance," Nathan said quietly. "Your Medicaid should cover most of it, but your out-of-pocket would still be around $3,000. $3,000. Elena made roughly $20,000 a year at the diner. $3,000 was more than 2 months' salary. It might as well have been $3 million. I can't afford that. I know. That's why I asked billing to run some other options. Nathan swiped to another screen. There's a charitable program through the hospital that could reduce your portion to around $1,500, and the clinic has a hardship fund that might be able to help with some of the remainder. $1,500 was still impossible. Elena shook her head, feeling the walls close in. I can't. I'm sorry. I know you went through all this trouble, but I can't. Elena, you don't understand. Her voice cracked. I have $400 in savings. $400. That's supposed to be my emergency fund, except every month there's a new emergency and it never grows. If I drain it for surgery, what happens when my car breaks down? Or I get evicted? Or... She stopped, pressing her hands against her eyes. I can't do this. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and Elena's ragged breathing. When she finally looked up, Nathan was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What if money wasn't an issue? But it is. Just hypothetically, if you didn't have to worry about the cost, would you want the surgery? Elena laughed, a bitter sound. What kind of question is that? Of course I would. I'd do it tomorrow if I could, but I can't, so it doesn't matter. Nathan stood pacing to the window and back. He looked like he was wrestling with something, some internal debate Elena wasn't privy to. I have a proposition for you, he said finally. I'm not going to like this, am I? Probably not. He sat back down, facing her directly. Let me pay for it. Elena blinked. What? The surgery. Let me cover the costs. You're joking. I'm not. I'm completely serious. Elena stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You're insane. I can't let you do that. Why not? Because I don't even know you. Because that's crazy. Because... She struggled to find words big enough for how absurd this was. You can't just offer to pay for a stranger's surgery. You're not a stranger, you're my patient. That doesn't mean you owe me thousands of dollars. Nathan stood too, and she was reminded again of how much taller he was, how much space he seemed to take up without trying. I'm not doing it because I owe you. I'm doing it because I can, and because you need help. I don't accept charity. It's not charity, it's... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that made him look suddenly younger. Look, you want the truth? I have more money than I know what to do with. My father was a pharmaceutical executive who left me a trust fund I never asked for and don't need. I became a doctor because I actually wanted to help people, not because I needed the income. So yes, I can afford to pay for your surgery without even noticing the dent in my bank account. And yes, I'm offering because the alternative is watching you suffer through something completely treatable because our healthcare system is broken. Elena stared at him. You're a billionaire. My father was. I'm just... He waved a hand dismissively. Comfortable. Oh my God, you're actually a billionaire. She'd known he had money. The Google search had told her that much. But hearing him talk about trust funds and not noticing thousands of dollars made it real in a way that felt surreal. That's really not the point here. It's absolutely the point, Elena's voice rose. Don't you see how this looks? Rich doctor swoops in to save poor patient? It's like something out of a bad movie. Would you rather be in pain? I'd rather not owe you something I can never pay back. I don't want you to pay me back. That's the whole point. They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, the conversation having escalated into something neither of them had quite intended. Elena wanted to walk out. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to maintain her pride, to refuse help from someone who clearly lived in a different universe than she did. But the pain in her abdomen throbbed, a constant reminder of what she was really refusing. Why? She asked, her voice smaller now. Why do you care this much? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Because I told you about my sister, but I didn't tell you the whole story. She waited because she couldn't afford treatment, and when she finally got help, it was only because I paid for it. I just finished my residency, didn't have much saved up, and watching her suffer while I scrambled to find the money was... He stopped, swallowed hard. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I wouldn't let someone else go through that. I'd help if I could. How many other patients have you made this offer to? You're the first. The admission hung between them. Elena didn't know what to do with it. I need time to think, she said finally. Okay? How much time? I don't know. A few days? A week, maybe. Nathan nodded. Fair enough. But Elena, while you're thinking, please be careful. If the pain gets significantly worse, if you develop a fever, if anything feels wrong, I know. Emergency room. You've told me. I'm serious. So am I. I'll think about it. I need to process all this. She left before he could say anything else, before the weight of his offer and her own desperation could combine into a decision she might regret. Outside, the evening had turned cold, the kind of damp chill that sank into bones and stayed there. Elena sat in her car for 10 minutes before starting it, her mind spinning. A billionaire wanted to pay for her surgery. A man she'd met 2 weeks ago, who had no obligation to her beyond the professional relationship of doctor and patient, was offering her thousands of dollars. It was absurd. It was generous beyond reason. It was terrifying. Because if she said yes, what would she owe him? What would he expect in return, even if he claimed to expect nothing? Elena had learned young that nothing in life came free. Every kindness had a price tag, even if it wasn't immediately visible. But the pain was getting worse. She could feel it even now, sitting still, a constant gnawing presence that sapped her energy and made everything harder. And the thought of it continuing, of it getting worse, of ending up in an emergency room someday with a ruptured cyst or worse. That scared her more than debt, more than obligation, maybe even more than trusting Nathan Cole. She drove home in a daze, parked in her usual spot, and climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, she made herself instant ramen, the cheap kind that cost 29 cents a package, and ate it standing at the counter while scrolling through her phone. A text from Nathan appeared while she was eating. "I know I came on strong today. Take all the time you need. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. N." Elena stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thanks. I'll let you know." She spent the rest of the evening trying to distract herself with television, but everything felt distant and unreal. Finally, around 11, she gave up and went to bed, though sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, her day off, Elena did something she rarely allowed herself. She slept in until 9, then spent an hour in bed just staring at the ceiling, letting her mind wander through possibilities and consequences. Around 10, she got up and made coffee, then settled at her tiny kitchen table with a notebook and pen. She drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side, she wrote, "Reasons to say yes." On the other, "Reasons to say no." The yes column was depressingly short. Less pain. Actual treatment. Not dying from a ruptured cyst. The no column filled up faster. Pride. Fear of obligation. What would he want in return? What if the surgery didn't work? What if she couldn't handle the recovery time and lost her job? What would people think if they knew? That last one stopped her. What people? She didn't have people. No family, no close friends, nobody who'd care one way or another how she paid for medical treatment. The only person whose opinion mattered was her own, and she was too tangled up in fear and pride to know what that opinion even was. Around noon, her phone rang. Marcus. "Hey kid, I know it's your day off, but any chance you can come in tonight? Sarah called in sick and we're slammed." Elena should have said no. Should have taken the time she'd promised herself to think, to rest, to figure out what she was going to do. But old habits died hard. "Yeah, I can be there by 5. "You're a lifesaver. Thanks, Elena." She hung up and immediately regretted it. Her body was already protesting the idea of a shift, the pain worse today than it had been in weeks. But she needed the money, needed the distraction, needed to feel useful for something. The shift was brutal. By 7 o'clock, Elena was moving on autopilot, her face locked in a professional smile while her body screamed. She dropped a tray of glasses, thankfully plastic ones, and had to clean up the mess while customers stared. She mixed up orders for tables 8 and 12, leading to a complaint that Marcus had to smooth over with free desserts. "You sure you're okay?" he asked during a rare, quiet moment. "Fine. Just tired." "You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine, Marcus." But she wasn't fine. By 9 o'clock, the pain had gone from bad to unbearable. Elena excused herself to the bathroom and stood gripping the sink, breathing through waves of agony that made her vision white out at the edges. When she looked up, her reflection was gray, sweat beading on her forehead despite the bathroom's chill. Something was wrong. Really wrong. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and did something she'd sworn she wouldn't do. She called Nathan's personal number. He answered on the second ring. "Elena?" "Something's wrong." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "The pain, it's different, worse. I don't know what to do." "Where are you?" "Work. The Bluebird Diner on 5th and Madison." "I'm 15 minutes away. Can you wait that long?" "I think so." "Don't hang up. Stay on the line with me." Elena leaned against the bathroom wall, phone pressed to her ear, listening to Nathan's voice talk her through breathing exercises while somewhere in the background she heard him moving, heard car doors, heard an engine start. "Still with me?" he asked. "Yeah." "Talk to me. Tell me about the diner." "What?" "Just talk. Distract yourself. What's it like working there?" Elena couldn't understand why he wanted to know, but his voice was calm and steady, and she clung to it like a lifeline. "It's old," she said. "Been there since the 70s. Marcus bought it in the 90s, hasn't changed much since. Blue vinyl booths, checkered floor, jukebox that doesn't work anymore. We serve breakfast all day and the coffee's terrible, but people keep coming back anyway." "How long have you worked there?" 3 years. Marcus gave me a job when nobody else would. I was fresh out of the group home system, no references, no experience. He took a chance on me. Group home? Foster care. Aged out at 18 with nothing. Marcus was the first person who... She stopped, the pain spiking again. Sorry, talking's getting hard. I'm pulling in now. Stay there. Elena heard the line go dead. She managed to push off the wall and stumble out of the bathroom. Marcus looked up from the register, his expression shifting immediately to alarm. Elena, Jesus, you look... I'm okay. My doctor's coming. I just need... The door chimed. Nathan strode in, still in what looked like the same clothes he'd been wearing earlier, jeans and a button-down under a leather jacket. His eyes found Elena immediately, and he crossed to her in 3 long strides. We're going to the hospital. No, Not a suggestion. Can you walk? Elena nodded, though even standing upright was taking all her concentration. Nathan looked at Marcus. Are you her manager? Yeah, what's going on? I'm her doctor. She needs emergency medical attention. I'm taking her to St. Catherine's now. Marcus was already untying Elena's apron. Go. Don't worry about the shift. Just take care of yourself, kid. Nathan's hand was on her elbow, steady and warm, guiding her toward the door. Elena let him, too tired and too scared to protest anymore. His car was parked illegally in front of the diner, hazard lights blinking. He helped her into the passenger seat, buckled her seatbelt, then jogged around to the driver's side. The drive to St. Catherine's Hospital was a blur. Nathan drove with one hand, the other resting on the center console where Elena had gripped it, without quite realizing she had. He talked to her the whole way, keeping her focused, asking questions she could barely answer. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Nathan had called ahead, of course he had, and they were met at the emergency entrance by a team ready and waiting. Someone put Elena in a wheelchair. Someone else was taking her vitals. Nathan was talking to the doctors in medical jargon that went over her head. And then she was in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, medication flowing through her that made the edges of the pain soften and blur. We're going to do an ultrasound, a doctor who wasn't Nathan told her. Dr. Cole suspects ovarian torsion. If that's what this is, you'll need emergency surgery tonight. I can't afford surgery, Elena said, but her voice sounded far away. Don't worry about that right now. We need to focus on treating you. The ultrasound confirmed Nathan's suspicion. The cyst on her right ovary had caused it to twist, cutting off blood supply. Without immediate surgery, she could lose the ovary entirely. We need your consent to operate, the surgeon, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, told Elena. We'll go in laparoscopically, untwist the ovary, remove the cyst, and assess for any damage. While we're in there, we'll also address the endometriosis lesions that Dr. Cole identified earlier. You're looking at 2 to 3 hours of surgery, a few days in the hospital, then several weeks of recovery. Elena looked past the surgeon to where Nathan stood in the doorway. He'd changed into scrubs. Was he going to be in the operating room too? His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his jaw. If I don't do it, she asked, you'll lose the ovary for certain, possibly develop sepsis. It could be life-threatening. And the cost? The surgeon glanced at Nathan, then back to Elena. We can discuss billing after you've recovered. Right now, we need to act fast. I'll handle the costs, Nathan said from the doorway. We already discussed this, Elena. Let them help you. Elena closed her eyes. She was out of choices, out of time, out of the luxury of pride. Okay, she whispered. Okay, do it. The pre-op prep was another blur. Consent forms she signed without reading. Anesthesiologist asking about allergies. Nurses shaving part of her abdomen. Someone marking her skin with a purple pen. The whole time Nathan was there, hovering at the edge of her peripheral vision. Just before they wheeled her toward the operating room, he appeared at her bedside. Hey, he said softly. Hey, you're going to be fine. Dr. Martinez is one of the best surgeons in the state. I'll be observing to make sure everything goes smoothly. You don't have to do that. I know. I want to. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, this man she barely knew who had upended her entire world in the space of 2 weeks. Why are you doing all this? She asked. Really? Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the bedrail near hers. Because you deserve help, he said finally. And because He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Because I can't stand watching someone suffer when I have the means to stop it. It's that simple. Nothing's ever that simple. Maybe not. But can we table the complicated parts until after you're out of surgery? Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Deal. They wheeled her away then, down bright hallways that smeared together, through double doors that swung open to reveal an operating room full of people and machines and lights so bright they hurt to look at. Someone was putting a mask over her face, telling her to count backward from 10. Elena got to 7 before the world went dark. Waking up from anesthesia felt like clawing through layers of cotton, each one heavier than the last. Elena heard voices first, muffled and distant, then felt the weight of blankets, the tug of an IV in her arm, the dull ache that had replaced the sharp agony from before. Her eyelids felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. Elena, can you hear me? She forced her eyes open. A nurse stood beside her bed, checking something on a monitor. The recovery room was dim, curtains drawn around her bed, creating a small cocoon of privacy. There you are, the nurse said with a warm smile. Surgery went well. You're in recovery. How's your pain level? 1 to 10? Elena tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. The nurse held a cup of ice chips to her lips. Try this first. Small sips. The ice helped. Elena managed a scratchy 4, maybe 5. That's good. The pain medication is working then. Dr. Martinez will be in soon to talk to you about how everything went. For now, just rest. Time moved strangely. Elena drifted in and out, never quite asleep, but not fully awake either. At some point, they moved her to a regular room, a private one, which seemed excessive until she remembered that Nathan was probably paying for all of this. The thought made her stomach twist with something she couldn't name. When she woke properly, late afternoon light was slanting through the window. Someone was sitting in the chair beside her bed. For a disoriented moment, she thought it was Nathan, but when she turned her head, she saw it was Marcus. Hey, kid, he said, setting down the magazine he'd been reading. Welcome back. Marcus? What are you doing here? Your doctor called to the diner, said you were out of surgery and doing okay? Figured you might want a familiar face when you woke up. He pulled something from a bag at his feet. Brought you some real food, too. Hospital stuff is garbage. It was a sandwich from the diner, turkey and Swiss on rye, her usual order during breaks. Elena's eyes stung unexpectedly. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. You've covered for me plenty of times. This is me returning the favor. Marcus leaned back in the chair. So, emergency surgery, huh? You could have told me things were that bad. Didn't want to worry you. Didn't really know myself until last night. That doctor of yours, Dr. Cole, he seems like good people. Stayed through your whole surgery, called me himself to update me. Most doctors wouldn't bother. Elena looked away. He's very thorough. That what we're calling it? Marcus's tone was knowing. He looked pretty worried for someone who's just being thorough. He's my doctor. It's his job to worry. If you say so. Marcus stood, stretching. I gotta get back to the diner for the dinner rush. You need anything before I go? No, thanks for coming, Marcus, really. Get some rest, and don't even think about coming back to work until you're actually healed. I mean it, Elena. Doctor's orders. After Marcus left, Elena ate half the sandwich, her appetite still weak, and dozed off again. When she woke the next time, the room was darker and Nathan was sitting where Marcus had been, scrolling through something on his phone. You don't have to babysit me, Elena said. Nathan looked up, and she saw the tiredness around his eyes. Not babysitting, just checking in. How long have you been here? Hour or so. I wanted to wait until you were more alert to talk about the surgery. He set his phone aside. Do you want to hear the details now, or would you rather wait until tomorrow? Now, I hate not knowing things. Nathan pulled the chair closer to the bed. The surgery went well. Dr. Martinez was able to save your ovary. It was touch and go for a while, but the tissue is viable. We removed the cyst, untwisted everything, and while we were in there, we ablated the endometriosis lesions we could see. Cleared out a significant amount of scar tissue, too. So I'm fixed? You're better. The endometriosis could come back eventually, but we've given you the best possible foundation for managing it long term. You'll need to follow up in a couple weeks, and we'll want to start you on hormonal therapy to help prevent recurrence. Elena absorbed this. When can I go home? Probably in 2 or 3 days, as long as you're recovering well. You'll need to take it easy for at least 4 weeks. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, definitely no waitressing shifts. 4 weeks? Elena's mind raced. 4 weeks without income, 4 weeks of rent she couldn't pay, bills that would pile up, savings she didn't have disappearing into nothing. I can't take 4 weeks off work. You don't have a choice. If you push yourself too hard too fast, you risk complications, infections, hernias, reopening the incision sites. I get it, but that doesn't change the fact that I have rent due in 2 weeks and no way to pay it. Nathan was quiet for a moment. What if that was taken care of? No? Elena's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. You haven't even heard what I was going to say. You were going to offer to pay my rent, or my bills, or give me money to live on while I recover, and I'm telling you no. Elena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You've already paid for the surgery. I don't even know how much that cost, and honestly, I don't want to know because the number will probably make me physically ill. But I have to draw the line somewhere, and this is it. I can't let you pay for my entire life. Why not? The question was so simple, so genuinely curious, that it stopped Elena cold. Because then what am I? She said finally. If you're paying for everything, if I'm dependent on you for surgery and rent and bills and food, what does that make me? Your charity case? Your project? It makes you someone who needs help and is willing to accept it. I've been accepting help my whole life. Foster homes, group homes, state assistance, food stamps, Medicaid. I know what it's like to be someone's burden, to owe people things I can never repay. I swore when I got out that I'd make it on my own, that I'd never owe anyone again. Nathan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And how's that working out for you? It was a low blow, and they both knew it. Elena felt anger spike through her exhaustion. Screw you. I'm serious. You almost died last night because you were too proud to ask for help earlier. You worked yourself into the ground because you couldn't afford to take time off. You're lying in a hospital bed after emergency surgery, and you're already worried about getting back to a job that pays you poverty wages and no benefits. So I'm asking, how's the independent thing working out? Better than being someone's kept woman. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Nathan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. That's the problem. Nathan stood, pacing to the window and back. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, carefully even. I'm going to say something, and I need you to actually listen. Can you do that? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. I'm not trying to make you dependent on me. I'm not trying to control you or own you or turn you into some kind of project I can feel good about. I'm offering help because you need it and because I can provide it. That's all. No strings, no expectations, no debt that needs to be repaid. People don't just give away money for nothing. I do. Or I'm trying to if you'll let me. He sat back down, and the frustration in his expression softened into something else. My father built a pharmaceutical empire by pricing life-saving medication so high that people had to choose between medicine and rent. He made billions off other people's suffering. I watched him do it my whole childhood, watched him justify it as capitalism, as the free market, as that's just how business works. And I hated it. I hated him for it. Elena stayed quiet, sensing there was more. When he died, he left everything to me, a fortune built on human misery. I could have refused it, let it go to some distant cousins who would have just continued his legacy. But I took it instead because I figured at least I could try to do something different with it. So I became a doctor. I opened clinics in underserved areas. I set up funds to help patients who can't afford treatment. I use his money to try to undo some of the damage he caused. That's very noble, Elena said, and it came out sharper than she'd meant it to. It's not noble. It's penance. There's a difference. Nathan looked at her directly. And you're right that most people don't give away money for nothing. But I'm not most people, and this isn't nothing. You're not nothing. The last sentence caught Elena off guard. She looked away, focusing on the TV mounted on the wall, currently showing some home improvement show with the sound off. I don't know how to accept this, she said quietly. Any of it. The surgery, the help, whatever this is between us. What do you think it is? I think you're my doctor and I'm your patient, and that's supposed to be where it ends, but it doesn't feel like that's where it ends. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. It doesn't. So what is it? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out too. He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of frustration she was starting to recognize. I know I crossed professional boundaries. I know I probably shouldn't have given you my personal number or shown up at your workplace or offered to pay for treatment beyond what's medically necessary. My father would have said, I'm being an idiot. My colleagues would probably say the same thing. Then why do it? Because the alternative is watching you suffer, and I can't. He stopped, started again. When you called me last night, when I heard your voice on the phone and you said something was wrong, I've never driven that fast in my life. I ran 2 red lights getting to that diner, and when I walked in and saw you standing there looking like you were about to collapse, all I could think was that I should have pushed harder earlier, should have convinced you to do the surgery before it became an emergency. That wasn't your responsibility. Maybe not, but I made it my responsibility the moment I decided to get involved. Elena didn't know what to say to that. The pain medication was making her fuzzy around the edges, making it hard to hold on to her anger, even though she knew she should probably still be angry. I need to sleep, she said. Okay. Nathan stood. I'll come back tomorrow to check on you. You don't have to. I know, I'm going to anyway. He left before she could argue further. Elena stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to untangle the mess of feelings in her chest. Gratitude and resentment, fear, and something that might have been hope, all knotted together so tightly she couldn't tell where one ended and another began. The next 2 days passed in a haze of recovery. Nurses came and went, checking her vitals, changing her dressings, helping her walk slow laps around the floor to prevent blood clots. The pain was manageable with medication, though they were already starting to wean her off the strong stuff and onto things she could take at home. Nathan visited every day, always in the afternoon when his clinic hours were done. He kept the conversations light, asking about her pain levels, explaining what to expect during recovery, telling her stories about medical school that made her almost smile. He never brought up money or rent or any of the things they'd argued about, and Elena was grateful for the reprieve even as the unresolved tension hummed between them. On the 3rd day, Dr. Martinez came by to clear her for discharge. You're healing well, the surgeon said, reviewing Elena's chart. Incisions look good, no signs of infection, pain is well controlled. I'm comfortable sending you home with instructions for follow-up care. Home. Elena had been trying not to think about her apartment, about climbing 3 flights of stairs with fresh surgical incisions, about being alone with no one to help if something went wrong. I'll need to arrange transportation, she said. Already done, Nathan said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. I'm driving you. You don't... We're not having this argument again. I'm driving you home, helping you get settled, and making sure you have everything you need. Non-negotiable. Dr. Martinez looked between them with an expression that suggested she'd seen this kind of dynamic before. You're lucky to have someone looking out for you, she told Elena. A lot of patients try to tough it out alone after surgery and end up back here with complications. After Dr. Martinez left, a nurse came in with discharge paperwork and prescriptions. Pain medication, antibiotics, anti-nausea pills in case the pain meds upset her stomach. Elena looked at the prescription names and tried not to calculate what they'd cost at the pharmacy. These are already filled, the nurse said, handing her a pharmacy bag. All set to go. Of course they were. Elena didn't have to ask who'd arrange that. Getting dressed was harder than she'd expected. The nurse helped her into the clothes Nathan had somehow acquired, soft sweatpants and a loose shirt. Nothing that would press against her incisions. Her own clothes from the night of the surgery were in a plastic bag, probably ruined by blood and medical scissors. Nathan appeared with a wheelchair just as she was finishing. Hospital policy, he said when she started to protest. Everyone gets wheeled out, even if they can walk. The ride down to the ground floor felt surreal. Elena had been on the 4th floor for 3 days, insulated from the real world by hospital routine and pain medication. Now she was being discharged back into a life that had bills and responsibilities and consequences. Nathan's car was waiting at the entrance, a black SUV that probably cost more than Elena would make in 5 years. He helped her into the passenger seat, careful of her incisions, then loaded the small bag of her belongings into the back. What's your address? He asked once he was in the driver's seat. Elena told him, then added, It's not much. Don't care. The drive to her building took 15 minutes through afternoon traffic. Elena watched the city slide past, familiar streets and storefronts, The corner store where she bought lottery tickets she never won, the bus stop where she'd waited countless mornings in the cold. Everything looked the same, but she felt fundamentally different, like the surgery had cut away more than just diseased tissue. When Nathan pulled up in front of her building, she saw him take in the scaffolding, the cracked front steps, the general air of neglect. "Third floor," she said. "No elevator." "That's fine. We'll take it slow." Getting out of the car hurt. Getting to the building entrance hurt worse. Nathan kept a steadying hand on her elbow, carrying her bag in his other hand, patient as she moved at a glacial pace. The stairs were their own special hell. Elena had to stop twice to catch her breath, pressing a hand to her abdomen where the incisions pulled with each step. Nathan never rushed her, never made her feel weak for needing breaks. By the time they reached her door, Elena was sweating and shaky. She fumbled with her keys. When had Nathan gotten her keys? Must have been while she was unconscious, and finally got the door open. Her apartment looked smaller and shabbier than she remembered. The single room with its sagging futon and kitchenette, the bathroom door that didn't close all the way, the window with the broken lock she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. She saw it through Nathan's eyes and wanted to sink through the floor. "It's clean," she said defensively. "I can see that." Nathan set her bag down and looked around. "Where do you want to set up? Bed or couch?" "They're the same thing. Futon." He helped her ease down onto the futon, stacking pillows behind her so she could sit propped up. Then he went to the kitchenette and started opening cabinets. "What are you doing?" "Checking what you have. You're going to need easy meals for the next few weeks. Nothing that requires much prep or standing." "I can manage." Nathan pulled out a box of instant ramen, examined it, set it aside. "When's the last time you went grocery shopping?" Elena couldn't remember. "I eat at the diner mostly." "Which you can't do for the next month." He closed the cabinet. "Okay, I'm making a list." "Of what?" "Things you need. Food for starters. Probably some better pain medication setup, heating pad, ice packs, books or movies or something to keep you occupied." "I don't need you to, Elena." Nathan turned to face her. "We can do this 2 ways. Either you let me help get you set up properly, or I leave and you try to manage on your own and end up back in the hospital in a week. Which would you prefer?" Elena wanted to tell him to leave, wanted to prove she could handle this herself, but she was tired and sore, and the thought of trying to navigate the next few weeks alone made her want to cry. "Fine," she said, "but I'm paying you back. If it makes you feel better to think that, sure." He was gone for an hour. Elena dozed fitfully on the futon, waking when she heard his key in the lock. He came in carrying multiple grocery bags, making 3 trips to bring everything up from his car. "I may have overdone it," he admitted, unpacking what looked like enough food to feed her for a month. Fresh fruit, pre-made salads, soup, sandwich ingredients, yogurt, granola bars. He'd even bought real coffee to replace her instant. In addition to food, he'd brought a heating pad, a travel pillow, a stack of magazines, and a bag from the pharmacy with extra gauze and medical tape for changing her dressings. "The pharmacy also sent up your refills," he said. "You've got enough pain meds for 2 weeks, but call if you need more before your follow-up." Elena watched him organize her kitchen with an efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. "Do you do this for all your patients?" "No. Just the stubborn ones who won't accept help any other way." When he was done, her tiny apartment looked more stocked than it had in months, maybe years. Nathan washed his hands, then came to sit on the edge of the futon. "Ground rules," he said. "You don't lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. You don't climb the stairs more than necessary. You change your dressings every day and call me if you see any signs of infection, redness, swelling, discharge, fever. You rest. Actually rest. Not your version of rest where you do things anyway. Understood?" "Yes, doctor." "I'm serious, Elena. This isn't something you can push through." "I know. I'll be careful." Nathan pulled out his phone. "I'm putting my number in your favorites. You call me if anything feels wrong. I don't care what time it is. You can't just drop everything every time I have a question." "Watch me." He stood, grabbed his jacket. "I'll check in tomorrow. Is morning or afternoon better?" "You don't need to check in at all." "Morning or afternoon?" Elena sighed. "Afternoon. I'm not a morning person." "Afternoon it is." He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "Elena?" Yeah? You did good. The surgery, the recovery, you're stronger than you think. He was gone before she could respond. Elena sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by groceries she hadn't bought and care she hadn't asked for, feeling like the ground had shifted under her feet and she still hadn't found her balance. The next week was harder than Elena had expected. The pain was manageable but constant, a dull ache that made every movement feel like an effort. She slept in strange fits and starts, her body's usual rhythm disrupted by medication and healing. Time passed strangely. Hours felt like minutes, minutes felt like hours. True to his word, Nathan checked in every afternoon. Sometimes in person, sometimes just a text asking how she was feeling. Elena told herself she should be annoyed by the attention, but mostly she was grateful for the contact, for the reminder that someone knew she was here. On the fourth day, she tried to go down to check her mail and made it halfway before the pain got bad enough that she had to sit on the stairs. She called Nathan, hating herself for it, and he talked her through breathing exercises until she could make it back up to her apartment. "This is ridiculous," she said when he showed up an hour later. "I can't even get my own mail." "What do you need from your mail?" "I don't know. Bills probably. Junk?" "I'll check it for you." He came back with a stack of envelopes. Mostly junk like she'd predicted, but there were also 2 bills, electric and internet. Elena opened them, saw the amounts due, felt the familiar anxiety settle in her chest. "I don't know how I'm going to pay these," she said. Nathan looked at the bills. "Let me—" "No." "Elena." "I said no. The surgery is one thing. Medical emergency, life or death, I get it. But my electric bill, that's just regular life, and I need to figure out how to handle regular life on my own." "And how are you planning to do that with no income for the next 3 weeks?" It was the question Elena had been avoiding. "I don't know. I'll figure something out. I always do." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, showed her the screen. "What's this?" "Job posting. My clinic needs someone to handle scheduling and patient follow-up calls. It's part-time, can be done from home, pays $15 an hour. You could start as soon as you're feeling up to it." Elena stared at the posting. "You're making up a job for me." "I'm not. We've needed someone for months. I just haven't gotten around to posting it. You'd be doing me a favor." "I don't have any office experience. You have customer service experience from the diner. You're organized, you show up on time, you're good with people. That's most of what the job requires." He set his phone down. "Look, I get it. You don't want handouts. Fine. This isn't a handout. It's a job. You work, you get paid. If you're terrible at it, I'll fire you. Deal?" Elena wanted to find the catch, the angle, the hidden string. But she couldn't see one. "When would I start?" "Whenever you're ready. Tomorrow if you want, or next week. Whenever you feel up to sitting at a computer for a few hours. And if I decide I don't want to work for you, then you don't. But you need income and I need help, so it seems like a reasonable solution to both problems." Elena thought about her dwindling savings, the bills on the table, the rent due in a week and a half. Thought about the pride that had nearly killed her, about the independence that was starting to look more like isolation. "Okay," she said. "I'll try it. But I'm serious. If I'm bad at it, you fire me. I don't want special treatment." Wouldn't dream of it. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena lay awake thinking about how much her life had changed in 3 weeks. She'd gone from avoiding Nathan Cole to depending on him, from insisting she needed no one to having someone show up every day to check on her. It terrified her, this shift, this vulnerability. Because people who showed up eventually left. People who helped eventually wanted something in return. That was the rule, the pattern, the lesson life had taught her over and over. But Nathan kept breaking the pattern, kept showing up without asking for anything, kept offering help without attaching conditions. Elena didn't know what to do with that, didn't know how to protect herself from caring about someone who might disappear. So she did what she always did when feelings got complicated. She pushed them down deep and focused on the practical. Recovery, work, bills, things she could control. The feelings could wait. Elena started the scheduling job on a Tuesday, 10 days after her surgery. Nathan had dropped off a laptop the day before. Clinic property, he'd said when she tried to refuse it, along with login credentials and a thick folder of instructions that turned out to be less complicated than they looked. The work itself was straightforward. Patients called to schedule appointments, reschedule existing ones, or ask questions about their upcoming visits. Elena took down information, entered it into the system, sent confirmation emails. Easy enough that she could do it from her futon with her laptop balanced on her knees, hard enough that it required actual concentration. By the end of her first 4-hour shift, she'd scheduled 23 appointments and only messed up twice, both times catching her mistakes before they caused real problems. Nathan called at 5 to check in. "How'd it go?" "Fine. Your patients talk a lot." "Yeah, they do. Mrs. Henderson tried to tell you about her grandson?" "Twice. Also her cat's digestive issues." Nathan laughed, and the sound was warm through the phone. "She does that to everyone. You get used to it." "I scheduled her for next Thursday at 10. "Perfect. She likes morning appointments." He paused. "You didn't overdo it, did you? 4 hours is a lot for your first day back." "I'm fine. Tired, but fine. Make sure you rest tonight. Tomorrow you can do another 4 hours if you're feeling up to it." After they hung up, Elena realized she'd smiled during the entire conversation. The realization unsettled her. She was getting comfortable with Nathan's presence in her life, with his daily check-ins and casual concern. Comfortable was dangerous. But the paycheck that appeared in her bank account at the end of the week was real and necessary. So Elena pushed down her discomfort and kept working. The routine helped. 4 hours of scheduling in the afternoon, the rest of the day spent recovering, reading the magazines Nathan had bought, watching shows on the secondhand TV that barely picked up 3 channels. Marcus called twice that first week to check on her. The second time, he mentioned they'd hired someone to cover her shifts temporarily. "Just until you're cleared to come back," he assured her. "Your job's waiting whenever you're ready." But Elena wondered if that was true. Temporary hires had a way of becoming permanent, especially when they were reliable and didn't need emergency surgery. She tried not to think about it, tried to focus on healing and the work she could do. Nathan's afternoon visits became routine. Sometimes he came to check her incisions, changing the dressings with practiced efficiency while asking about her day. Sometimes he just showed up with coffee, good coffee from the shop where they'd run into each other, and sat on the ratty armchair she'd found on a curb 2 years ago, talking about nothing important. "Tell me something about yourself," he said one afternoon, nearly 2 weeks post-surgery. Elena looked up from her laptop. "Like what?" "Anything. I know the medical stuff, the basic facts, but I don't know you." "There's not much to know." "I don't believe that." Elena closed the laptop, buying herself time to think. "What do you want to know? What did you want to be when you were a kid, before life got complicated?" The question surprised her. Most people didn't ask about her childhood, probably sensing it wasn't a happy topic. "A teacher," she said finally. "Elementary school. I used to think it would be nice to be the kind of adult who helped kids, the one they remembered as actually giving a damn." "You could still do that," Elena laughed, bitter. "Yeah, with what money? What time? I barely finished high school, Nathan. College isn't exactly in the cards. Community college exists. Financial aid exists. You're smart, Elena. I've seen how fast you picked up the scheduling system, how you handle difficult patients on the phone. You could absolutely go back to school if you wanted to." "Why are you pushing this?" "I'm not pushing. I'm just saying you don't have to limit yourself to what seems possible right now." Elena wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. "What did you want to be as a kid?" "A veterinarian. I was obsessed with animals, wanted to save them all." He smiled slightly. "My father hated it. Kept telling me real doctors treated people, not pets. Eventually I caved and went to medical school instead of vet school." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But then I remember I can actually help people, make a real difference in their lives. Can't do that if I'm neutering cats." "Nothing wrong with neutering cats." "No, there isn't. But this feels right most days." He looked at her. "Do you feel right working at the diner?" "It pays the bills." "That's not what I asked." Elena thought about it. "No," she admitted, "but feeling right is a luxury I can't afford." "Maybe you can now. The scheduling job is yours permanently if you want it. We could increase your hours once you're fully recovered, make it full-time. Benefits, paid time off, the whole thing." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're good at it, and we need the help. Also because you deserve a job that doesn't destroy your body." Elena wanted to say yes, wanted to grab onto the offer with both hands and never look back at the diner, at the aching feet and rude customers and tips that never stretched far enough. But accepting felt like admitting she couldn't make it on her own, like proving that she needed Nathan in a way that went beyond medical care. "I need to think about it," she said. Nathan nodded, not pushing. "Take your time." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions. What did Nathan want from her? Why was he being so generous? And most frightening of all, what happened when he got tired of helping and moved on to someone else? She was still awake at 2 a.m. when her phone buzzed with a text from him. "Can't sleep either. Want company?" Elena stared at the message. The smart thing would be to say no, to maintain boundaries, to not let him any further into her life than he already was. She texted back, "Doors unlocked." He arrived 20 minutes later carrying a bag from the 24-hour diner 2 blocks over, not the Bluebird somewhere else. He'd brought fries and milkshakes, the kind of food that made no sense at 2 a.m. but somehow felt exactly right. "Couldn't sleep?" Elena asked, making room for him on the futon. "My daughter had a nightmare. Got her back to sleep, but then I was wide awake." He handed her a milkshake. Chocolate. Somehow he'd remembered she mentioned liking chocolate. "Figured you might be up too." It was the first time he'd mentioned his daughter since that initial conversation about his personal life. Elena had almost forgotten he was a father. "How old is she?" "Say 6. Her name's Riley." Nathan pulled out his phone, showed Elena a photo. A little girl with dark curls and Nathan's eyes, grinning at the camera with 2 missing front teeth. "She's beautiful. She's a terror, smart as hell, stubborn as a mule, doesn't take no for an answer." He said it with clear pride. "Sounds like someone else I know." Nathan smiled. "Yeah, I've been told we're alike. Her mom used to say—" He stopped abruptly. "Used to?" "Riley's mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. Ovarian, actually." He set his phone down. "That's part of why your case hit me so hard." "Similar symptoms, similar delays in treatment, except Jenna's delays were because she didn't have insurance, and by the time they diagnosed her, it was stage 4. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. "Nathan, I'm so sorry." "It's okay." "Well, it's not okay, but we're managing. Riley doesn't remember her much, which is its own kind of tragedy." He took a drink of his milkshake. "My sister helps a lot. She picks Riley up from school, watches her when I have late clinic hours. I don't know what I'd do without her." "Is that why you became so involved with my treatment? Because of Jenna?" "Partly. But also because—" He turned to look at her directly. "You reminded me that the system is still broken, that people are still suffering because they can't afford care, and I have the resources to help, so why wouldn't I? Most people with resources don't think that way. Most people with resources didn't watch their wife die because she was terrified of medical debt. They sat in silence for a while, eating fries that had gone slightly cold, drinking milkshakes that were too thick to sip easily." Elena tried to reconcile this version of Nathan, grieving widower, single father, man still carrying his wife's death like an open wound, with the confident doctor she'd first met. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. Why me specifically? I know you said the medical stuff, the similarities to Jenna, but there have to be dozens of patients at your clinic in similar situations. Why am I the one you're helping?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "Honest answer?" "Please. That first day you came into the clinic, you looked terrified. Not just of the appointment, but of everything. Like you were waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. And when I saw you at the coffee shop afterward, you had this expression like you were trying to convince yourself you could handle everything alone." He turned his milkshake cup in his hands. "I recognized that look. I wore it for a year after Jenna died. This desperate need to prove I didn't need help, that I could manage everything myself. And my sister finally sat me down and said, 'You can be strong or you can be stupid, but you can't be both. So you're calling me stupid? I'm calling you human. We all need help sometimes. I needed it. Riley needs it. You need it. There's no shame in that." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that needing help didn't make her weak or broken or less than. But decades of survival instincts didn't just disappear because someone said nice words. "What if I can't pay you back?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. The surgery, the job, everything. "What if I can never even it out?" "Then you don't." "I'm not keeping score, Elena." "Everyone keeps score." "I don't." He shifted to face her more fully. Look, I know trust is hard for you. I get that. But I need you to believe me when I say I don't want anything from you except for you to get better and live a life that doesn't hurt all the time. That's it. That's the whole agenda. And when you get tired of that agenda, when helping me stops being interesting or rewarding or whatever it is that's motivating you right now, Nathan's expression shifted into something Elena couldn't quite read. Is that really what you think? That this is some kind of project I'll get bored with? Isn't it? No, it's not. He stood, pacing to the window and back, that familiar gesture of frustration. You want to know what this is? Really? Yes, I care about you. Not as a patient, not as a project, as a person. I look forward to these visits. I think about you when I'm not here. When you called me that night from the diner, I was scared in a way that had nothing to do with professional concern. He stopped in front of her. So no, this isn't going to get boring. If anything, it keeps getting more complicated. Elena's heart was pounding. Complicated how? Complicated like I probably shouldn't be sitting in your apartment at 2 a.m. eating fries and talking about my dead wife. Complicated like there are ethics rules about doctors dating patients, and I'm already bending them by being here. Complicated like I can't tell if you feel any of this too, or if I'm completely misreading the situation. You're not misreading it. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Nathan sat back down, close enough that their knees touched. So where does that leave us? I don't know. Terrified, mostly. Yeah. Same. They looked at each other, and Elena saw her own uncertainty reflected back. This man who had everything, money, status, a medical empire, a beautiful daughter, was sitting in her shabby apartment admitting he was scared. The vulnerability of it undid something in her. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. I've never had anything good that didn't eventually fall apart. I don't know how to trust that you won't leave. I can't promise I won't screw this up. I'm still figuring out how to be a single parent, how to run clinics, how to exist in the world without Jenna. I'm kind of a mess most days. You hide it well. So do you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. What if we're both messes and we figure it out anyway? Elena looked at their joined hands, his larger, warmer, steadier than her own trembling fingers. What about the ethics rules? You said doctors can't date patients. Technically, you're not my patient anymore. Dr. Martinez handled your surgery, and I can transfer your follow-up care to another doctor at the clinic. We'd have to be careful, document everything properly, but it's allowed. You've already thought this through. I've thought about very little else for the past 2 weeks. Elena should have been alarmed by that, should have pulled her hand away and told him this was too fast, too complicated, too much. Instead, she found herself asking, what happens now? Now we take it slow. I keep checking on you because you're still recovering. You keep working the scheduling job because you're good at it, and we need you. And maybe, when you're feeling better, I take you to dinner somewhere nicer than a 2 a.m. diner run. I don't have clothes for nice restaurants. Then we'll go somewhere you don't need fancy clothes, a place that serves good food and doesn't care if you show up in jeans. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not trying to change you, Elena. I like you exactly as you are. Stubborn and scared and trying so hard to be strong even when you don't have to be. I'm not sure I know how to not be strong. Then we'll figure that out too. They finished their milkshakes in more comfortable silence, hands still linked, the weight of their admission settling into something that felt less terrifying and more like possibility. When Nathan finally left around 3:30, Elena lay awake until dawn, not from anxiety, but from the strange, unfamiliar flutter of something that might have been hope. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of recovery and routine. Elena's incisions healed cleanly, the pain fading from constant to occasional. She increased her work hours to 6 per day, then 8, building up stamina and falling into an easy rhythm with the clinic staff. The other schedulers welcomed her, teaching her shortcuts in the system and warning her about which patients were talkers and which preferred brisk efficiency. Nathan visited less frequently as she recovered, both of them conscious of maintaining some professional distance now that feelings had been acknowledged. But he texted every day, sometimes about work, sometimes random observations that made her smile, sometimes just checking in. 3 weeks post-surgery, Elena had her follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez. Nathan had arranged for another doctor from the clinic to attend instead of him, maintaining that professional boundary. Dr. Martinez declared her healed, cleared her for normal activities, and scheduled a 3-month follow-up to monitor for endometriosis recurrence. "You're doing great," Dr. Martinez said. "Whatever you've been doing for recovery, keep it up." Elena thought about the stocked fridge, the laptop that made working possible, the daily check-ins that had kept her accountable to actually resting. "I've had good support," she said. "It shows. A lot of patients try to rush back to normal life and end up with complications. You actually listen to instructions." That night, Marcus called. "Hey kid, how you feeling?" "Good. Got cleared by my doctor today." "That's great. So listen, I need to talk to you about the diner." Elena's stomach dropped. Here it was. The temporary hire had worked out. They didn't need her anymore. She was being let go. "The girl we hired to cover your shifts is moving back to Ohio next week. Her mom's sick, so your job's here whenever you want to come back." Relief flooded through her. "When do you need me?" "Yesterday, honestly. But I know you're still recovering. Maybe start with a few short shifts next week. See how your body handles it." Elena thought about the scheduling job, about the choice Nathan had offered. Full-time with benefits, or back to the diner with its unpredictable tips and aching feet. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If I didn't come back, if I found something else, would you be okay?" There was a long pause. "You got a better offer?" "Maybe. I don't know yet. But I want to make sure you'd be all right if I didn't come back to the Bluebird." "Elena, you've been one of my best servers for 3 years. I'd hate to lose you. But if you got something better, something that treats you right, then I'd be happy for you. You deserve good things, kid. Don't let loyalty to me keep you from taking them." After they hung up, Elena stared at her phone for a long time. Then she texted Nathan. "Can we talk tomorrow?" "About the job offer." His response came quickly. "Of course. My place or yours?" She'd never been to his place, had carefully maintained that boundary, keeping their interactions in neutral territory or her apartment. But maybe it was time to see how the other half lived. "Yours," she typed back. Nathan sent an address in a neighborhood Elena had only ever driven through, never stopped in. Old money area, tree-lined streets, houses that probably had more bathrooms than her entire apartment building had units. The next evening, Elena took the bus as far as it went, then walked the last 6 blocks to Nathan's address. The house was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow worse. A beautiful old Victorian painted slate blue with white trim, a wraparound porch, a yard with actual landscaping. The kind of house Elena used to imagine living in when she was a kid in foster care, before she learned to limit her dreams to things that might actually be possible. She stood on the sidewalk for a full minute before forcing herself up the front walk and ringing the doorbell. Nathan answered in jeans and a t-shirt, barefoot, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Hey, come in." The inside was warm and lived in, not the sterile showplace she'd half expected. Toys scattered in the hallway, kids' drawings on the refrigerator, a general sense of organized chaos that spoke of actual life happening here. "Riley's at my sister's for the night," Nathan said, leading her to the kitchen. "Figured we could talk without interruption. You want coffee? Wine? Water?" "Water's fine." He poured them both glasses, and they settled at the kitchen table, a big farmhouse thing that had probably cost more than Elena's car. She tried not to calculate the value of everything around her and failed. "So," Nathan said, "the job. I want to take it, full-time, with benefits, if the offer's still open." "It is. You sure? Marcus seemed like a good boss." "He is. But you're right. The diner's destroying my body, and I—" She stopped, trying to find words. "I like the scheduling work. I'm good at it. It feels like something I could build on, maybe eventually do more at the clinic, medical assistant training or something." Nathan's face lit up. "We have a program for that. Partner with the community college, cover tuition for employees who want to train as EMAs or LPNs. You could absolutely do that if you wanted." The possibility opened up in front of her, vast and terrifying. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "That I'll fail, that I'm not actually smart enough or capable enough. That this is all some kind of mistake, and eventually everyone will realize I don't belong." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "That's imposter syndrome. Everyone feels it, especially when they're doing something new. You won't fail, Elena. You're one of the most capable people I know. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you survived a childhood that would have broken most people. I know you built a life from nothing. I know you were working yourself to death because you were too stubborn to ask for help. Those aren't the traits of someone who fails. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could be more than she'd always thought possible. Okay, she said, I'll do it. The full-time job and eventually the MA training if I don't completely screw up first. You won't screw up. They talked logistics for a while, start date, hours, benefits enrollment. Elena would give Marcus 2 weeks' notice, start full-time at the clinic the first of next month. The pay was more than she'd ever made, enough to build actual savings, to maybe eventually move to an apartment without broken windows and questionable plumbing. When the business talk ran out, they moved to the living room. Nathan put on music, something instrumental and jazz-adjacent that Elena didn't recognize but liked. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, comfortable in a way that felt new and fragile. Can I ask you something? Elena said after a while. Always. What do you tell Riley about me? Does she know you're whatever this is we're doing? She knows I have a friend who's been sick and I've been helping. She's 6, so she doesn't need details beyond that. He smiled slightly. Though she did ask yesterday if my friend was pretty. I may have mentioned you more than I realized. What did you tell her? The truth. That yes, you're pretty and also smart and brave and stubborn. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. When do I get to meet her? Whenever you're ready. No pressure, but she's a big part of my life. Eventually, I'd like you two to know each other. I've never been around kids much. What if she doesn't like me? She will. And if by some chance she doesn't, we'll figure it out. Nathan shifted closer. But I think she'll love you. You're exactly the kind of person I want in her life. Someone who doesn't give up, who fights for what matters, who knows what it's like when life is hard. They talked until late, about everything and nothing. Riley's school and favorite foods, Elena's thoughts about maybe taking college classes, Nathan's plans to expand the clinic network. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences that didn't need filling. Around 11, Elena realized she'd missed the last bus. I can drive you, Nathan offered. Or I could stay. The words were out before she'd fully thought them through. I mean, not like that, just it's late, and your couch is comfortable, and… Elena, Nathan's voice was gentle. You can stay. Guest room is upstairs, second door on the left. There are spare toothbrushes in the bathroom cabinet. She should have felt awkward, sleeping in Nathan's house, using his guest room with its actual guest bed and matching furniture. But instead, she felt safe, cared for in a way that didn't demand anything in return. The next morning, she woke to sounds from the kitchen and the smell of coffee. When she ventured downstairs, Nathan was making breakfast. Actual breakfast, not just cereal or toast. Pancakes okay? He asked. You didn't have to do this. I know, wanted to. They ate at the kitchen table while early morning light streamed through the windows. It felt domestic in a way Elena had never experienced. Like this could be normal. Like she could belong in a house like this, with a man like Nathan, in a life that didn't hurt all the time. What are you thinking? Nathan asked. That this is nice. Scary, but nice. Yeah, he agreed. It really is. Elena gave Marcus her 2 weeks' notice on a Thursday afternoon during the slow period between lunch and dinner. He took it better than she'd expected, pulling her into a quick hug and telling her he was proud of her for moving up in the world. You'll do great things, kid, he said. Just don't forget about us little people when you're running that fancy clinic. I'm just going to be answering phones, Marcus. For now. But I've watched you these past 3 years. You don't stay in one place. You're always moving forward, even when life's trying to push you back. The comment stayed with Elena through her final shifts at the Bluebird. She'd never thought of herself that way, as someone moving forward. Mostly she'd felt like she was treading water, barely keeping her head above the surface. But maybe Marcus saw something she didn't. Her last day at the diner was a Saturday. The regular customers made a fuss, tipping extra and wishing her well. Sarah, one of the other servers, had organized a small cake during Elena's break. It wasn't fancy, just grocery store sheet cake with "Good luck, Elena" in blue frosting, but it made her throat tight anyway. You better come back and visit, Sarah said. Don't get too important for us. I won't, I promise. Walking out of the Bluebird for the last time felt surreal. Elena stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the faded blue awning, the familiar windows, the doors she'd walked through thousands of times. This place had kept her fed and housed for 3 years. It hadn't been much, but it had been hers. Nathan was waiting in his car across the street. He'd offered to pick her up, take her to dinner to celebrate. Elena had almost said no, old habits of independence dying hard, but she'd caught herself and said yes instead. "How do you feel?" he asked when she got in the car. "Weird, sad, relieved, all of it at once." "That's normal. Endings are complicated even when they're good." He took her to a small Italian place in a neighborhood she'd never been to. The kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and waiters who'd clearly been working there for decades. Nothing pretentious, nothing that made her feel out of place. Over pasta and wine, good wine that Nathan ordered without looking at the prices, Elena found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did. The past month had been a constant state of tension, of waiting for the other shoe to drop, of bracing for disaster. But sitting across from Nathan, watching him gesticulate while telling a story about Riley's recent school play, she felt something shift. "You're staring," Nathan said, smiling. "Sorry, just thinking." "About?" "About how strange this all is. A month ago, I'd never even heard of you. Now I'm starting a new job at your clinic and having dinner with you and—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. "And I keep waiting for it to fall apart, for you to realize this was a mistake, for something to go wrong." Nathan set down his fork. "What would convince you it's not going to fall apart?" "I don't know. Time, maybe? Evidence that this is real and not just some temporary thing you're doing because you feel sorry for me." "I don't feel sorry for you, Elena. I'm in awe of you. You survived things that would have destroyed most people and you're still standing, still fighting. That's not someone to pity. That's someone to admire. You barely know what I survived. So tell me." Elena looked down at her plate. She'd spent her whole life not talking about her childhood, keeping it locked away where it couldn't hurt her. But Nathan had shared his grief about Jenna, had let her see his vulnerability. Maybe it was time to return the favor. "My mom was 16 when she had me," Elena said quietly. "Drug addict, in and out of jail. I don't remember her much. They took me away when I was 4. Foster care after that. 7 different homes before I aged out at 18. That's a lot of disruption. Yeah, some homes were okay, some were not. I learned pretty fast not to get attached to anything or anyone because it would just get taken away." She took a sip of wine. "When I aged out, they gave me a bus pass and a list of shelters. That was it. No family, no support system, no idea how to exist in the real world." "How did you manage?" "Couch surfed for a while, stayed with people from the group home until they got tired of me, worked whatever jobs would hire someone with no experience and no permanent address. Eventually saved enough for the security deposit on my apartment. It's not much, but it's mine. Nobody can take it away as long as I pay rent." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry you went through that." "Don't be. It made me tough. Maybe too tough, according to you. Not too tough, just tough enough that you forgot how to let people in." Elena laughed, but it came out watery. "Is that your professional diagnosis, Dr. Cole?" "That's my personal observation, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you're letting me in, even if you're terrified the whole time." "How do you know I'm terrified?" "Because I am too. Every single day I wake up scared that I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to say the wrong thing or push too hard or not push hard enough. Dating is complicated when you've got a kid and a demanding job and a dead wife you're still not entirely over." It was the most honest he'd been about Jenna. Elena squeezed his hand. "Do you think she'd approve of this?" Nathan considered the question. "I think she'd be glad I'm not alone anymore. Jenna was practical like that. She made me promise, before she died, that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life mourning. She said Riley needed a father who was present, not one who was stuck in the past." "That must have been hard to hear." "It was. But she was right. She usually was." He smiled sadly. "I'm not trying to replace her. I don't think that's possible. But I'm trying to move forward, to build something new, and I'd like to build it with you, if you're willing." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm willing. Just be patient with me. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I. We'll figure it out together." They finished dinner and Nathan drove her home. walking her up to her apartment despite her protests that she was fine on her own. "I know you're fine," he said, "but I want to." At her door, they stood in the dim hallway light, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that she'd come to associate with safety. "Can I kiss you?" Nathan asked. Elena's heart hammered. Yes. He kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious that might break. Elena rose onto her toes, pressing closer, letting herself feel wanted for the first time in longer than she could remember. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I should go," Nathan said, but he didn't move. "Probably. Riley's expecting me home." "I know." He kissed her again, less carefully this time, and Elena let herself get lost in it. When he finally left, she floated into her apartment and spent the rest of the night replaying every moment, every touch, every word. Elena started full-time at the clinic the following Monday. The other staff welcomed her warmly, and she settled into a routine that felt sustainable in a way the diner never had. No aching feet, no rude customers, no tips that determined whether she could afford groceries that week. Just steady work, steady pay, and the knowledge that she was helping people navigate a healthcare system that was often deliberately confusing. 3 weeks into the job, Nathan invited her to dinner at his house with Riley. Elena spent an embarrassing amount of time picking out clothes. Nothing too fancy, nothing too casual, nothing that screamed, "I'm trying too hard to impress your 6-year-old daughter." She settled on jeans and a simple sweater, then second-guessed the choice all the way to Nathan's house. Riley answered the door, all wild curls and missing teeth and intense scrutiny. "You're Elena," she announced. "I am." "You're Riley. Daddy says you work at his clinic." "I do. I help schedule appointments." Riley considered this. "Do you like pizza? We're having pizza." "I love pizza." "Good. Come in." Just like that, Elena was accepted. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Riley talking nonstop about school and her best friend Maya and the hamster she wanted but Nathan kept saying no to. Nathan interjected occasionally, usually to correct wild exaggerations, and Elena found herself laughing more than she had in years. After dinner, Riley insisted on showing Elena her room, an explosion of pink and purple with stuffed animals covering every surface. "This is Mr. Fluffkins," Riley said, holding up a bedraggled teddy bear. "He's very old. Mommy gave him to me when I was a baby." Elena's chest tightened. "He looks very loved." "He is. Daddy says Mommy loved me very much even though she had to go away." "I'm sure she did." Riley studied Elena with unsettling intensity. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Elena froze. We haven't really..." "Because Daddy smiles more when he talks about you, and he only smiles like that about people he really, really likes." "Does that bother you, that he really, really likes me?" Riley thought about it seriously. "No. Daddy's lonely sometimes. I can tell. Maya says her mom is lonely too since her dad moved out, so maybe all grown-ups are lonely." The observation was so earnest and perceptive that Elena didn't know how to respond. She settled for, "Your dad is lucky to have you." "I know. He tells me all the time." Later, after Riley was in bed, Nathan and Elena sat on the porch with wine and the comfortable silence that had become their default. "She interrogated you about being my girlfriend, didn't she?" Nathan asked. "How did you know?" "Because she asked me the same question this morning. I told her we were dating and seeing where it goes." "What did she say?" "She asked if that meant you'd be around more. When I said probably, she seemed pleased. Then she asked if you could help her with her science project because I'm not good at building things." He grimaced. "She's not wrong." Elena laughed. "I'm not sure I'm much better, but I'll try." "She likes you, I can tell." "I like her too. She's great, Nathan. You're doing something right. Most days I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly." He looked at Elena. "It means a lot that you're willing to be part of this. Not everyone would want to date someone with a kid." "Are we dating officially now? I thought we were still in the seeing where it goes phase." "We can be whatever you want to call it, but I'd like to call you my girlfriend, if that's okay." The word felt foreign and wonderful at the same time. "Okay, yeah, that's okay." The next few months unfolded with a steadiness Elena had never experienced. She worked at the clinic, slowly building confidence and competence. She spent weekends with Nathan and Riley, helping with homework and learning to braid hair, and attending school events where she felt simultaneously out of place and exactly where she belonged. Her 3-month follow-up with Dr. Martinez showed no signs of endometriosis recurrence. Elena started hormonal therapy as planned, managing the side effects with the same stubbornness she brought to everything else. She and Nathan fell into an easy rhythm. Dinner at his place twice a week, occasional date nights when his sister could watch Riley, long phone calls on the nights they were apart. Elena kept her apartment, maintaining that piece of independence even as she spent less and less time there. In February, nearly 6 months after her surgery, Nathan brought up the medical assistant training program again. "Applications for the spring semester are due next week," he said over coffee at their usual shop. "Have you thought more about it?" Elena had thought about little else. The idea of going back to school terrified her, but it also excited her in a way nothing had in years. What if I'm not smart enough? What if I fail? Then you try again. Or you don't, and you keep doing scheduling work, which you're excellent at. But Elena, you won't fail. You're one of the sharpest people I know. You're biased. Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true. Elena applied that night, sitting at Nathan's kitchen table while Riley did homework beside her and Nathan cooked dinner. The application asked for a personal essay about why she wanted to enter healthcare. Elena stared at the blank page for 20 minutes before finally writing the truth, that she'd spent her life on the receiving end of a broken healthcare system, and she wanted to be part of fixing it. That she wanted to be the kind of medical professional who saw patients as people, who understood that affording treatment wasn't just about money, but about time and fear and pride and 1,000 other factors. That she'd been given a second chance at health, and she wanted to help others get the same. She submitted it at 11 p.m. and immediately regretted every word. "It's too honest," she told Nathan. "Too personal. They're going to think I'm a mess. They're going to think you have perspective and passion, both of which are exactly what healthcare needs." Elena got her acceptance letter 3 weeks later. She stared at it for a full minute before the words sank in. She'd been accepted. She was going to college. At 30 years old, with no family support and no safety net beyond what she'd built herself, she was going to become a medical assistant. She called Nathan immediately. He answered on the first ring. "I got in," she said, her voice shaking. "I knew you would. When do classes start?" "May. 8 weeks of intensive training, then a clinical rotation." She took a breath. "Nathan, I'm terrified." "I know. You're going to do it anyway, because that's who you are." That night, Nathan took her and Riley out to celebrate. Riley was convinced Elena was going to be a real doctor soon, and no amount of explanation about the difference between medical assistants and physicians could convince her otherwise. "You're going to wear scrubs and help people feel better," Riley declared. "That's a real doctor." "She's got a point," Nathan said, grinning at Elena's exasperation. The training program was brutal. 8 weeks of condensed learning, medical terminology, anatomy and physiology, clinical procedures, patient communication. Elena studied at night after work, on weekends, every spare moment she could find. Nathan helped when he could, quizzing her on terminology and letting her practice taking vitals on him and Riley. There were moments when Elena wanted to quit, when the material was too hard, when she failed a practice exam, when her classmates, most of them a decade younger, seemed to grasp concepts faster than she did. But every time she thought about giving up, Nathan was there. Not pushing, just steady, reminding her why she'd started. She passed the final exam with a score high enough to surprise even herself. The clinical rotation placed her at one of Nathan's clinics, working under a supervising physician who wasn't Nathan, maintaining those ethical boundaries they'd been careful about. On her first day of clinicals, Elena put on scrubs for the first time. She stood in front of Nathan's bathroom mirror, looking at her reflection, and barely recognized herself. She looked professional, capable, like someone who belonged in a medical setting. "You ready?" Nathan asked from the doorway. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He kissed her temple. "That's my girl." The clinical rotation confirmed what Elena had suspected. She was good at this. She had a natural rapport with patients, especially the scared ones, the ones who'd put off treatment too long, the ones who reminded her of herself 6 months ago. She knew how to talk to them without condescension, how to listen to what they weren't saying, how to advocate for them when the system tried to fail them. Her supervising physician wrote a glowing evaluation. Elena graduated from the program in July, certified and ready to work. Nathan offered her a position as a medical assistant at the flagship clinic, and Elena accepted without hesitation. She loved the work, loved being part of patient care in a direct way, loved learning from physicians and nurses, loved the feeling of helping someone navigate their healthcare journey. Some days were hard, watching people struggle with diagnoses, seeing the fear in their eyes when they learned about costs, understanding too well what they were going through. But even the hard days felt meaningful in a way waitressing never had. In September, nearly a year after her surgery, Elena finally moved out of her studio apartment. She'd been spending most nights at Nathan's house anyway, and Riley had started calling the guest room Elena's room, even though Elena usually slept in Nathan's. "Just move in officially," Nathan had said one morning over breakfast. "Riley wants you here. I want you here. Your apartment is basically a storage unit at this point." Elena had resisted at first, clinging to that last piece of independence. But the truth was, Nathan's house felt more like home than her apartment ever had. It felt like the place she was supposed to be. Moving day was chaotic. Nathan had recruited his sister to help, and Riley was convinced she needed to supervise everything. Elena's belongings looked sparse and shabby next to Nathan's furniture, her thrift store finds and hand-me-downs clearly out of place in his beautiful house. "We can get new stuff," Nathan offered, seeing her expression. "Whatever you want." "No, this is mine. It comes with me." He understood. These things represented survival, independence, the life she'd built when no one thought she could. They deserved a place in her new life, too. That night, after everything was unpacked and Riley was asleep, Nathan and Elena sat on the porch like they had so many times before. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Being officially moved in?" "Terrifying, right. Like I'm waiting for someone to tell me I don't actually belong here." "You belong here, more than I think you realize." Nathan pulled something from his pocket, a small box that made Elena's heart stop. "Which is why I wanted to ask you something." "Nathan, let me get this out before I lose my nerve." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, not flashy, not ostentatious, just a single stone on a delicate band. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a year, and you're just starting your career, and there are probably 1,000 practical reasons to wait. But I don't want to wait. I love you, Elena. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you love Riley like she's yours. I love how you fight for what matters and refuse to give up even when things are hard. I want to build a life with you. I want Riley to have a mother who shows her what resilience looks like. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life." He took a breath. "So will you marry me?" Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the enormity of what he was offering. Not just marriage, but family, belonging, a future that looked nothing like the one she'd imagined for herself a year ago. I'm not." She stopped, started again. "I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to get scared and try to run. I'm going to have days where I can't believe this is real. I know. I'm going to mess up too. We both will. But we'll figure it out together. What if I can't be what Riley needs? What if I'm a terrible mother? You're already what Riley needs. She told me last week that she hopes you say yes because she wants you to be her mom for real." That broke something loose in Elena's chest. "She said that?" "She did. So what do you say? Will you marry us?" Elena looked at the ring, at Nathan's hopeful expression, at the house behind them full of light and life and possibility. A year ago, she'd been alone in a sterile clinic room, convinced she couldn't afford to be sick, certain she'd have to handle everything herself. Now she was here, being offered everything she'd never let herself want. The old Elena would have said no, would have found reasons to protect herself, to maintain distance, to avoid the risk of losing something good. But Elena had learned something over the past year. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't standing alone. Sometimes it was letting someone stand with you. "Yes," she said, and felt the word reshape her entire world. "Yes, I'll marry you." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and Elena stared at it through tears. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. Nathan had probably measured her finger while she slept, planned this for weeks, made sure every detail was right. That was who he was, careful, thoughtful, and possibly generous in ways Elena was still learning to accept. They told Riley the next morning. She screamed with joy loud enough that the neighbors probably heard, then insisted on calling Nathan's sister immediately to share the news. "We're going to be a real family," Riley announced. "Elena's going to be my mom, and we're going to live together forever and ever." "We already live together, sweetheart," Nathan pointed out. "Yes, but now it's official. Maya says official means it counts for real." The wedding planning was simpler than Elena expected, mostly because neither she nor Nathan wanted anything elaborate. They settled on a small ceremony in the backyard, just family and close friends, Riley as the flower girl, Nathan's sister as maid of honor. Elena invited Marcus from the diner and a few of her former co-workers. She had no family to invite, but standing in the backyard surrounded by people who'd chosen to be part of her life, Elena realized she'd built her own family. It looked nothing like what she'd imagined as a kid, but it was real, and it was hers. The ceremony itself was short and sweet. Elena wore a simple dress she'd found on sale. Nothing fancy because she didn't need fancy. Nathan wore a suit and couldn't stop smiling. Riley took her flower girl duties seriously, scattering petals with solemn concentration. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Riley stage whispered, "Nobody better," and the whole gathering laughed. Elena's vows were short because her throat kept closing with emotion. "A year ago, I thought I had to do everything alone. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that accepting help isn't weakness, that letting someone in isn't surrender. You gave me a second chance at everything: health, career, family, love. I promised to spend the rest of my life being brave enough to let you keep loving me." Nathan's vows were longer, but the part that stuck with Elena was the end. "You walked into my clinic thinking you couldn't afford to be sick, and you walked out having changed my entire life. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Thank you for being exactly who you are. I can't wait to spend forever figuring out this life with you." They kissed to applause and Riley's enthusiastic cheering. The reception was cake and dancing in the backyard, Riley sticky with frosting and overexcited, Nathan's sister making a toast about how happy she was that her brother had found someone who challenged him to be better. That night, after everyone had gone home and Riley was asleep upstairs, Elena and Nathan sat on the porch one more time. Elena was still in her wedding dress. Nathan had lost his jacket somewhere, and they were both exhausted and happy. "Mrs. Cole," Nathan said, testing out the name. "I'm keeping Brooks professionally," Elena said. "Elena Brooks sounds like a medical assistant. Elena Cole sounds like someone who married into money." "Fair enough. Elena Brooks Cole as a compromise? Maybe. We'll see." She leaned against his shoulder. "Is it supposed to feel this surreal, being married?" "Probably. Everything about us has been surreal from the start." "True." Elena looked at the ring on her finger, still not quite used to its weight. "I keep thinking about that first day. If I'd known then where it would lead." "Would you have run faster?" "Maybe, probably," she smiled. "But I'm glad I didn't." "Yeah, me too." 2 years later, Elena stood in an examination room at the clinic, taking vitals on a nervous young woman who'd clearly been putting off this appointment for too long. The woman's hand shook as she answered Elena's intake questions, her voice barely above a whisper when she admitted she wasn't sure she could afford treatment. Elena finished the vitals, then sat down so she was at eye level with the patient. "I understand," she said quietly. "I was where you are once, scared, broke, convinced I couldn't afford to be sick. But there are options. Programs that can help. And I promise you, whatever you're dealing with, it's better to know and get treatment than to wait until it becomes an emergency." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I just don't know what to do." "Let the doctor examine you first. Then we'll figure out next steps together. You don't have to do this alone, okay?" After the appointment, Elena made notes in the patient's chart, flagged her case for the financial assistance program, and sent a message to the physician about potential treatment options. It was what she did every day now, help people navigate the system that had once seemed impossible to her. She'd completed her medical assistant certification with honors. She was considering applying to nursing school, though she hadn't decided for sure yet. Riley was thriving in 3rd grade, calling Elena Mom, like she'd always been there. Nathan had expanded his clinic network to include 2 more locations in underserved areas. And Elena had learned something important. Accepting help wasn't weakness. Building a life with someone wasn't giving up independence. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you couldn't do everything alone. She'd spent most of her life believing she had to be strong enough to survive anything by herself. But strength, she'd learned, also meant knowing when to let someone help carry the weight. It meant building connections instead of walls. It meant choosing trust over fear, even when fear felt safer. Elena Brooks had walked into Hawthorne Women's Health Clinic expecting a routine appointment and finding instead the beginning of everything. A year of pain and surgery and recovery and learning to accept love. A year of realizing that the walls she'd built to protect herself were actually keeping her trapped. Sometimes the story of how two people found each other wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it was about small acts of kindness, about showing up consistently, about refusing to give up on someone even when they were determined to give up on themselves. Nathan had seen past Elena's fear to the strength underneath, and Elena had learned that letting someone see her vulnerability didn't make her weak. It made her human. On her way out of the clinic that evening, Elena stopped in the doorway of what used to be Dr. Morrison's office, now Nathan's when he was at this location. He was at his desk, reviewing charts, completely absorbed in his work. She thought about the man who'd walked into her life when she least expected it, who'd refused to let her hide behind pride and fear, who'd shown her what it meant to be genuinely cared for, who'd given her not just medical treatment, but a second chance at everything. As if sensing her presence, Nathan looked up and smiled. Ready to go home? Home. The word still felt miraculous sometimes. Yeah, Elena said. Let's go home. And they did, together, the way they'd been doing everything for the past 2 years, the way Elena hoped they'd keep doing for the rest of their lives. Imperfectly, messily, but always honestly. Always choosing each other, always moving forward instead of running away. Because Elena had finally learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't surviving alone. It was letting yourself be loved.